I go by the name Ruby, a 26-year-old single woman without a full-time job. Since my middle school years, I've tended to keep to myself quite a bit. I went to high school, but I dropped out, so I only have a middle school education. Since then, I've been living with my parents, working part-time jobs, and taking on work from online postings. I have an older brother named James, who's 3 years older than me, and he's the complete opposite of me. Good at sports, lots of friends, and the so-called outgoing type. My brother didn't want people to know he had a sister like me. He never brought friends home, and even if I happened to run into him and his friends at the convenience store, he'd ignore me. I thought it couldn't be helped and considered it like someone else's problem. Once my brother started college and moved out to live on his own, I stopped worrying about such things. Then there was talk of my brother getting married. He would be turning 29. It wasn't surprising. Later, it was decided that my brother would bring his fiancée to our parents' house. Since I was home that day, I decided to join them. "Dad, Mom, I'm home," I announced as my brother arrived on time. When he saw me sitting with our parents, he looked confused for a moment. "Sorry to intrude." His fiancée entered the house, seemingly unaware of my brother's attitude. Then looking at me, she said, "Hi," and looked puzzled. I could tell from her eyes that she was asking my brother, "Who is this?" He probably hadn't told her about me. "Thank you for coming all this way. I'm James's mother, this is his father." My mother introduced only herself and my father. The fiancé seemed satisfied and bowed politely but still looked puzzled. My father didn't follow up on my behalf. My parents have always been harsh with me, who couldn't live up to my accomplished brother. When we were young, they'd say things like, "Your brother can do it, why can't you?" As if it was part of our education. But it changed as we grew older. Eventually, I was even called a money-sucking leech. It seemed that my parents were planning to ignore me at this meeting too. "I'll go and get some more drinks." As my mother stood up to leave, she whispered in my ear, "Why are you here? Go back to your room." I had attended this meeting because I wanted to get along with my family in my own way, but it seemed to have backfired. Still, I couldn't just leave, so I stayed put. My brother's fiancée introduced herself as Emma. She was the same age as me, 26, but a beautiful woman with a refined atmosphere, giving off a vibe that I shouldn't casually talk to her. My brother seemed a bit annoyed. He probably didn't like me being there. He introduced the woman to our father and mother, but he didn't talk to me at all. It felt like a ghost. When the conversation about the marriage was over, casual chatter naturally started, but my brother still acted like I didn't exist. Then James asked, What do you usually do, Ruby?" Before I could answer, my brother interrupted. "Wait, Emma, you don't need to talk to her." That's what he said clearly. Emma looked a bit surprised. "That's right, don't worry about it," my mother chimed in. "Yeah, don't worry about it, she's just a stranger with a blood relation." When my father said that, something inside me ended. A stranger, huh? I thought so. Reconciliation was impossible from the start. That's how the meeting ended, as if it didn't matter whether I was there or not. Soon after, my brother and Emma got married and started building a house to live in together. My brother works at a famous company after graduating from college. He's still in his 20s, but his income seems good. Emma is going to be a stay-at-home wife and has already quit her job. Around the time my brother's house was completed, we received an invitation to a housewarming party. It would be held with a limited number of guests, including Emma's relatives and my brother's bosses. My mother was anxious, saying, "Oh, it's already finished, time flies, we need to prepare a housewarming gift. What should we get?" My father said, We're family, so it doesn't have to be anything fancy. And he casually turned over the invitation. Only my father and mother's names were on the invitation. My name wasn't there. My mother seemed to have noticed but asked, "Ruby is coming too, right?" I wondered what she meant. At the meeting they had introduced me in such a horrible way. "It's fine if I'm not invited," I declined, but my mother insisted. "No, you're coming, I'll make arrangements." So, I ended up going to the party. On the day of the party, it suddenly started raining. My parents and I took a taxi to my brother's house. My brother and his wife didn't come out to the front yard because of the rain, and welcomed their guests at the entrance. As soon as we arrived at my brother's house, my mother said to me, "You pay for the taxi," and got out of the car with my father first, without umbrellas. They both hurried toward the entrance, so that's why I thought there was quite a distance between my brother's house and ours. I thought it was extravagant to take a taxi. I was the one called to pay for the car. After I paid, I ran towards the entrance, and Emma asked me, "Who are you?" I had only met Emma once before. Maybe she forgot me, I thought so, and introduced myself. "I'm Ruby, James's sister," but she said with a smile. "Ah, the high school dropout, neat. We didn't invite the parasite living off a parent." Emma said this casually with a smile. My brother, who had just returned from showing someone in, came out too. He said to me with disdain, "Huh, why are you here?" "Hey James, I told you not to invite her, why is she here?" "Well, I don't know either, my brother didn't want to invite me after all," and Emma changed her attitude once she knew about me. "Actually, she's worse than my brother and parents. Would it have been better if I didn't come?" I asked my brother cautiously. "Yeah, you're a stranger because of your low education. Actually, not finishing high school doesn't even count as an education, right? Could you please leave the property quickly?" Emma followed up on what my brother said. Like she was siding with him. Her expression remained calm the whole time, which was truly terrifying. Understood, I turned on my heel. The taxi from earlier was gone, and since we weren't on a main street, it seemed difficult to find another one. I didn't have an umbrella. I trudged along, getting drenched in the rain. I could hear Emma's laughter from behind. After a while, I returned home. My parents came back, looking like they had a good time. They saw my face and asked, "Why did you leave suddenly? Couldn't even call a taxi for the way back? You're so useless," my mother complained, as if it were a matter of course. "Sorry, I suddenly had a stomach ache," I lied to cover it up. "For such a reason, you left on your own. You're hopeless. Make sure to give the gift later, you're an adult," my father told me. Speaking of which, I had prepared something to give at the party, but I brought it back without giving it. I wanted to send it by mail, but I didn't know the address. I could ask my parents, but the atmosphere was awkward. So I decided to contact my brother. "I want to send a gift. Can you tell me the address?" This was the only reply from my brother. "I don't give my address to strangers, right?" I let out a sigh. Is it really fun to start dominance over me in private? Not just embarrassing to introduce to others, I couldn't help but be amazed. It might not be just my brother who's sending these messages. Maybe Emma is also typing and laughing out loud. Either way, it's ridiculous. I gave up on sending a congratulatory gift with the meaning of my brother and his wife in their housewarming party. I decided to leave home. I realized I couldn't get along with my family anymore and decided to live on my own. I didn't have a full-time job, but I had some savings from my part-time work. I was able to rent a room for living alone. Since it wasn't much to live on, I decided to try streaming videos in my spare time. I was already interested in watching streams as a hobby and was good at finding trends among popular streamers and ways to increase views. When I started doing it myself, I made tens of thousands a month. The amount grew, covering my living expenses. I decided to invest the money I wasn't using. The investments went well, and I decided to try running a small company importing and selling goods. I was busy in a good way and fulfilled every day. I didn't have a family that would complain about me using the computer all the time. A few months later, I received a call from my parents who hadn't contacted me since I left home. "We want you to help James financially," they said. "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. I wondered what could have happened to the person who just built a new house. My parents slowly began to explain the situation. My brother apparently held frequent parties after building his new house, interacting with various people such as bosses, executives, clients, and Emma's acquaintances. Among them, someone proposed an investment opportunity, and my brother ended up trusting the proposal. He wasted a large sum of money, lured by the promise of making big returns in just a few months. I was amazed. My brother had a decent job, so if he had just kept working hard, he wouldn't have made such a mistake. "Who is the person who recommended the investment? Isn't it a scam?" I asked. "No, it's not. It's one of Emma's acquaintances." My parents seemed to completely trust Emma. "How much do you need?" She was shocked when I asked. It was an amount that a company employee couldn't easily pay. "Is that really the amount my brother needs as a loan?" I asked my parents hesitantly, and as expected, they gave me the answer I feared. We were also introduced to the same investment. My parents hesitated before responding. "I can't come up with that much money so easily." "Sorry." I tried to hang up the phone, but they clung on, saying, "We're your real family. Help us out in times like these." Real family. Too little, too late. "Sorry, but I'm busy and I'm a stranger to you, right?" With that, I hung up the phone. Later on, somehow they found out, and my parents' and brother's families showed up. The location was the office of the company I run. I was in a business meeting at the time. My secretary informed me, "There are guests here for you, President." "I don't have any other appointments." "Who are they?" I shuddered. I apologized to the business partner I was meeting with and excused myself for a moment. When I went to the reception area, there stood my pregnant sister-in-law, Emma, my brother and my parents. "You're running a company, huh?" "Well, it's much smaller than where I work." My brother smirked and looked around the office. "Who are you?" I asked, pretending I didn't know them. "What's with the attitude?" my brother shouted, losing his temper. My mother intervened and explained. "We talked about this before, but we need your support. You're running a company, so you can help us out, right?" My mother shamelessly asked for money as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Yeah, it's an important time for our family. Emma is about to give birth, the child's growth isn't good, so we need to see a good doctor." "Please, Ruby," my father and Emma chimed in, acting as if it was my duty to pay off everyone's debts. Employees occasionally walked by the reception area, glancing over with concern. Wanting to get rid of them as quickly as possible, I said, "Please leave. You're causing a disturbance." My brother exploded with anger again. "What? We're a disturbance? We came all the way here, and that's how you talk to your family," he yelled. The employees passing by stopped in their tracks, facing them. My brother started to make a scene. "Do you all know this girl dropped out of middle school? She was a shut-in, no NEET." He seemed intent on humiliating me. If I didn't give him the money, however, the employees responded with words my brother didn't expect. "We know everyone knows the president's background, me too. The president hires many people from similar situations. Is there a problem?" My brother, who usually socializes only with highly educated and high-income people, seemed caught off guard and stammered, Uh. Instead, my father said, "What a pathetic company, just a gathering of needs." My brother chimed in, "Exactly, companies that do business with a place like this can't be any good either." He yelled loudly. At that moment, the president of the company I was meeting with, who had been waiting in the reception room, came out. He must have heard the shouting. My brother's face went blank and then turned pale as he looked at the man. He lowered his gaze. "What's wrong, James?" Emma asked. My brother whispered to Emma, "Idiot, don't say my name." But it was too late. James, oh, it's you." The company president walked straight up to my brother and looked at his face. "You're the guy who always falls, Mr. Long. The division manager, right? We owe a lot to your company." His company was also a client of my brother's company. My brother was sweating profusely from every pore on his face. I guess I'm not memorable since we're not a D-in company," my brother mumbled. When the president threw my brother's words back at him, my brother went, "Oh," and froze up. My father, mother and Emma also sensed the trouble and fell silent. I apologized to the president again. Ignoring them, "I'm sorry for taking up your valuable time. I'll ask them to leave." "Are you sure?" "I have time today, so I don't mind waiting. You can prioritize talking with your family." "No, they're not my family." I glanced at my parents' and brother's family as I said this. "They're complete strangers." After that, my parents' and brother's family were kicked out of the company. Maybe they were stunned by the exchange with the company president, but they left quietly. As for how my job was exposed, I was curious, so I looked into it and found out that Emma was the cause. She had a friend who was well informed about investment-related information and always had her antenna up. There was a young woman in her 20s who was making a name for herself as a talented trader and company owner. Emma was surprised when she saw a photo in the media and realized that this woman was her husband's sister, who she had heard was a middle school dropout and a MET. Emma told my brother and parents about this and suggested they ask me for money. Since I was busy during the day and didn't answer the phone and I didn't call them back after they asked me for money, they came to my company. I had been treating them like complete strangers, so I decided not to get involved with them anymore. But I couldn't help but look into Emma. I was curious about her friend being involved in my parents' and brother's financial failures. That friend was Emma's ex-boyfriend. In fact, they seemed to still be involved. By the way, the child in Emma's womb wasn't my brother's, but the child of that investor. No way, my brother was devastated. It's natural to be upset since everything had been a lie. Furthermore, it seems she had been extracting money from several other men under the guidance of her ex-boyfriend. Of course, my brother and Emma ended up getting a divorce. Emma is now under police custody along with her ex-boyfriend. However, the lost money won't be returned anytime soon. Ever since the incident at my company, my brother's position at his workplace worsened. In his 20s, he was transferred to a so-called Windows side department and eventually resigned. He couldn't work there for long and eventually resigned. Possibly irritated by the financial failure and trouble surrounding my brother, my father got into trouble when the president witnessed him losing his temper with a subcontractor at work. After investigating his work attitude, he was fired. Apparently he had been saying things like, "Junior high or high school graduates are worthless," and, "If you didn't graduate from a certain university or higher, you're not a real person," similar to what he used to say to me. So both my brother and father ended up losing their jobs. The family, or rather former family, whose income decreased, still contacts me, saying, "Let's live together." By the way, I had them banned from entering my company's building, so they can't force their way in anymore. With everything that happened, we're still family, right? The unemployed trio tries various tactics to cling to me, but my answer is always the same. I don't know you, you're complete strangers to me. I have no intention of giving any other response in the future.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.